He's told us what he will do. It's very easy to see the steps that he will take. People who say, well, if he's elected, it's not that dangerous because we have all of these checks and balances, don't fully understand the extent to which the Republicans in Congress today have been co-opted. One of the things that we see happening today is a sort of a sleepwalking into dictatorship in the United States.
That's former Congresswoman Liz Cheney continuing to sound the alarm on the threat to democracy posed by Donald Trump. And she's not the only one. In a gripping opinion essay in the Washington Post, columnist and neoconservative scholar Robert Kagan warns that a Trump dictatorship is increasingly inevitable if the twice impeached, 4 times indicted on 91 counts former president wins the job back in 2024. President Biden has been issuing similar warnings for months about the man he beat in 2020. But last night on the campaign trail in Iowa, in typical Trump fashion, he went full-scale projection by making this claim about President Joe Biden.
Joe Biden is not the defender of American democracy. Joe Biden is the destroyer of American democracy.
Sure. Basil Smikle and former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman are back with me. Governor, your reaction to Trump's that accusation about President Biden?
It's ridiculous. I mean, President Biden, whether you like him or not, think he should be the next nominee of the Democrats, is really immaterial right now, because right now he is the stability that's keeping the country together, that's keeping our allies overseas together, that has done some really good things for the economy. If you look at what's happening with inflation, the gas prices are going down. The trouble is that it's not hitting all sections of the economy, and people are still hurting, which is why Congress needs to act on these things and start to play a positive part. But I believe absolutely in what Liz Cheney is saying, that a Trump presidency, another Trump presidency, and we lose our democracy. Or we're very, very close to it. Because 2020, the election's held on by a thread, by a few people who absolutely refused the pressure to overturn and do what they knew was wrong.
You know, Governor, in Kagan's Washington Post op-ed, he writes this: as perilous as it is for Republicans to say a negative word about Trump today, it will be impossible once he has sewn up the nomination. The party will be in full general election mode, subordinating all to the presidential campaign. There will be no more infighting, only outfighting. In short, a tsunami of Trump support from all directions. Governor, as a former Republican office holder, does Kagan's warning ring true?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. We know that Trump supporters, I mean, first of all, let me just say, I don't think there is a Republican Party. There is a cult around Donald Trump. They didn't adopt a platform in 2020, which meant they didn't set out what they stood for. It was whatever Donald Trump tells us we should stand for today, that's what we'll stand for. So it's not a party as we have known it. And that is, believe what he says. He says what he's going to do. Believe him. He will tear down the very guardrails of our democracy, the things, the rule of law, the respect for the Constitution. I mean, that's going to go with him because he said he's going to do it. And nobody should question that. Yeah. He means what he says.
Yeah, he means what he says. And Basil, I mean, I've made it a point to tell people he's telling us exactly what he will do if he's reelected in 2024. And so given that, given the warnings from the likes of Kagan and Liz Cheney, if the election were held today, it would be a nail biter. Yeah. But the question is, why?
Well, my overarching answer to that question is the country is not where we thought it was, right? There were a lot of people that felt, even with some skepticism that we were in this post-racial America after Barack Obama got elected. Clearly not the case. Clearly with his election, there was backlash. And the fact is that a lot of us actually expected that backlash to come, because anytime there's progress, particularly with people of color, particularly with African Americans, substantial backlash. We saw it coming. If you remember in 2016, Donald Trump was on those stages going after reporters specifically, calling them out by name, something we had not really seen before. So we saw the sort of elements of nihilism coming from Donald Trump way back then. When you put all of that together now, it's a nail biter because there are still people that believe in his ability to drain the swamp and to connect ethnic nationalism with economic nationalism. The problem with that, among so many problems with that, is that it is, as Liz Cheney said, slow walking us to democracy.
Dictatorship.
Dictatorships. Ooh, sorry. Slow walking us to dictatorship. On the Democratic side, the challenge that people have is that even though Joe Biden is seen as old, I think the bigger problem is that he's a little old school. That he just has a way of politics and a way of politicking that a lot of young voters just don't really buy into today. And I understand that to some extent. The bigger problem is that there's a challenge with the overall narrative of our capitalistic society. And a lot of people are not getting that American dream that they said, that we keep saying that they have the ability to get. With that in mind, I do think this issue of dictatorship is going to keep driving people to the polls.
And real quickly, one more question, because we are out of time. But with Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation out there, isn't the danger to democracy bigger than Trump? Because no matter who the next Republican president might be, there's a turnkey operation that will be at their disposal and ready to go at 12:01 p.m.
Right.
January 20th, 2025. So shouldn't we broaden the aperture here? Trump is a threat. What the threat is the party.
The threat is Trumpism that is in every institution everywhere in the country. It's not just about the man. It's about all of the loyalists that are in positions of power everywhere. That's the danger.